This week's episode has been sponsored by Oh My Bod, shifting the evolution of pleasure. Hi. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Zoe.
And you are listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. And at the moment, there's a catfight breaking out on my Sex Advice for Seniors Facebook page. Mainly, actually, it's over two topics. And I have to say that one of them is very, I do completely understand why. And the other one, not so much, because we've discussed it before. The one is about the fact that the men that follow the Facebook page, Sex Advice for Seniors, have taken umbrage with my suggesting to them that porn might be contributing to their unsatisfying sexual relationships with their partners, or in fact, the fact that they can't get it up, or lots of other things. And they're really getting quite angry with me. Although
so
I'm not
responding to them. It's not a
really
cat
fight. No, it's a cock fight.
Okay. So one of the things that I want to say, as somebody who is in media talking about sex quite a lot, I want to just sort of put it out there that you're not saying no men should ever watch porn, right? You're saying if you are having unsatisfactory, sexual relations and unreliable erections, or you need, intercourse. One of the things that happens a lot with people with penises who masturbate a lot is that, and you've said this, we have said this, that you get used to that level of stimulation. It's the same thing as when women use vibrators.
Absolutely.
And you get used to a certain intensity of stimulation that isn't necessarily going to happen without a hand or without a vibrator, right?
Yeah.
So it's just information, people. It's just information.
I mean, and also it's not like I feel like as if I'm saying anything particularly revolutionary, although maybe because, we know that people struggle to talk about sex and they may not have heard a woman talking about porn before. And I am a woman and I am talking about men and what happens with men. And so men with penises tell me that that doesn't have a penis shouldn't really be talking to them about their penis if I don't have one. We can talk about lots of things that we don't necessarily have direct experience with, but have enough education around to be able to be knowledgeable. I think like we don't have to have gone through the Civil War to talk about what the Civil War was like.
It's science. It's sexology. It's not, we're not making moral judgments.
No.
And you are not anti-porn either.
No.
I mean,
people on social media, and this is one of the things about being what I've now come to realize is being a person like you who's been out there in the public and has now developed a bit of a following, is that you have to have a really fucking thick skin in this game, because you get so much shit as soon as you open your mouth to talk about sex, like so much shit. And I think I'm doing this mainly for free, guys. Like I'm not making thousands here off of this. I'm just doing this because I'm a woman of experience and that's had, some significant sexual history. And I'm just sharing with you what I've learned as a result of that. That is it. I don't need to have shit around that. Just leave me alone.
Well, and I think you and I both are on a sort of mission, and many others in our field, to to have conversations and to normalize sexual activity, in a way that's not loaded up with shame and inhibition and morality and judgment and all of that, So it's actually, I welcome all of these conversations, but don't make us the enemy here. We're just opening up the conversation.
But you can see, because social media is not very good at filtering out hate, as we know, or abuse or anything like that. And as I was noticing before, bizarrely, TikTok filters out more hate than the other social media platforms. But what I've noticed is this consistent voice of conservatism and the far right that comes through a lot, right? Yeah. So I didn't, because so much of social media and so much of the traffic that we get is from the States, I noticed that the voices that I hear coming from America are really those incredibly conservative. We should only have sex within a loving marriage. We should only do this. Somebody actually wrote today, masturbation makes you blind.
Come on.
No, I'm not joking. Someone actually wrote that. And I thought, come on, seriously, is that where we are here with this? This is but this is the sort of craziness that I can see. I'm just trying to ignore most of it, but I can see that there is this very, very strong, very conservative Christian values, all that sort of stuff that's kind of filtering its way through and trying to make everybody feel bad about sex and sexual pleasure, right? I mean, it's just those people with the loudest voice. It's quite scary, actually. Now that I reflect on it, it is kind of scary.
I mean, it's deeply disturbing, and I'm terrified, and so are my kids. And I mean, we're not going to get into politics here, but it's as far as, reproductive rights, and I mean, there are all kinds of dimensions of this, but the ideas around sex are, it's like going back many decades.
Yeah, completely. And it's interesting to hear people talking about, on the one hand, you've got this kind of far right group who were telling me that porn is okay in some.
Well, that's
right?
the thing. That's
so
the
they're
thing.
telling
It's
me
the same people who are ashamed that are digging in. It's it's the people who are like, this is masturbation is wrong, and don't tell me not to watch porn.
But what are they doing with their hands when they're watching porn?
Yeah, no, it's very hypocritical, and
it doesn't make and then they start to talk about, oh, well, what do those old porn stars do? I mean, the whole thing is really kind of scary, but I think also it's scary as a sex educator to try, or just someone with an interest in sex, actually, to be able to just share their own experience and their own feelings around what's happened in my case, in my own life, what I've witnessed. I'm not trying to shame anybody. I'm not trying to do anything. I'm just trying to put out the information as I see it. And people are really hating on me, which is
it's interesting too that it's what has elicited the most hate is coming from men.
Yeah. So that leads me on to the next topic, which I knew was going to be a sensitive topic, and I should have considered it before I put it out there, which was the aspect of circumcised versus not circumcised penises. Now I said that as a woman, I personally don't experience any more or less pleasure whether or not a man is circumcised or not, right? That was just me talking from a purely aesthetic point of view, that this penis in its way didn't impact on my own pleasure. Now, I could acknowledge that it may impact on their pleasure and that there may be definite things that happen to men who are circumcised. And I'm of the Jewish faith, so, enough said around that. And, but there were, again, conversations going on in that, some people were talking about it in terms of mutilation and getting really quite fierce about that. I totally understand where that's coming from. But then there was a very, very strong voice, again, around the cleanliness aspect, which again, coming from Europe, where most penises are not circumcised, I just thought, I can't believe we're still having a discussion about the fact that you're not washing your penis. And these were people that really believed that uncircumcised penises were unclean, honestly.
They're Americans, aren't they?
Yeah, I suspect they are.
Yeah, well, because that's what they're taught. That's what they're taught. That it's like, and it's now a few generations of that. It's this. It was the same thing as like formula is better than breast milk, you know. And I'm not a breast milk evangelist. In fact, I couldn't breastfeed my kids. I had radiation treatment, and like I was not. I can't make milk.
Yeah.
So, and I was. I mean, there's the other side of that coin. But like, I mean, I was really traumatized during a movement, the breast milk movement, where I was told I was poisoning my babies because I was needed to feed them. Anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But there, I mean, in this country during a certain era, we were indoctrinated into like formula is better than breast milk.
Yeah.
And so we've been indoctrinated in the United States. I mean, it's trending completely differently now, and many, many, many more people are not circumcising their boys.
Yeah.
But, that's what we were taught. It's not clean. Yeah. There's an increased, there's data that shows that if you have a foreskin, you have an increased likelihood of penile cancer and like all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So I understand where that notion comes from. What is continually troubling to me is that nobody is leaning into, not nobody, but many, many people, a vast number of people are not leaning into science. No. And are not willing to question, and I swear, I think some of it comes from this shame or, if we were talking about toes and toenails, it wouldn't have this kind of charge to it. But you start talking about people's genitals and they get hysterical,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I completely understand where the whole clean versus unclean, circumcised versus uncircumcised thing comes from. But as we all know now, like you just clean yourself and then and that's it. Like there's no more that needs to be said about that. It's just keep it clean and you're going to be fine. And like most men I know as well who are uncircumcised, like if they're not using a condom because we're in a relationship, for example, then they go and have a wash after.
Yeah.
Like I go and have a little wash, and it's not, this is not big challenging stuff here. But yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, there are so many, one of the things that last week's episode brought up, of course, Lauren was bringing up around vaginal estrogen and all of that. And so a friend of mine who was having some issues around dryness decided to call up her GP. Now we're in Spain, and they said, no, we can't give you that without doing blood work. We can't do this. We can't do that. And she was like, no, it's just like, this is the symptoms. This is what's going on. Right. And they just didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to give it to her. They didn't want to hear it. And she felt quite dismissed. And after I was kind of evangelizing about it, she got quite excited about the fact that this could potentially transform her sexual pleasure. So she's now on a mission to try and find somebody that can support her potentially in her decision to get something, which, to be honest, in the UK, I made one phone call to my GP. I said, this is what I'm experiencing. This is what I think I'd really like this. They said, yeah, sure, no problem. The prescription will be ready in 15 minutes. It's going to be sent to your phone. I went to the pharmacy, picked it up, no problem, right? No problem, no discussion, no pushback, no nothing. And so, what I realized is it's not just that we have to be aware of some of the stupid stuff that we've been told, but also, as you said, we've got to fight for our own sexual health now, especially as women, and got to demand what we think we need or what we think we want, because it's not just stupid conservative far right people that are telling us we can't do this and we can't do this with our bodies, right? We can't, abortions and all the rest of it. But also now there's a lot of doctors out there who are also uneducated, which doesn't help matters. And so it's really now been completely up to us to have these, to be armed with the knowledge that we need to be able to go and seek the help that we should be getting anyway.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it when she told me that. I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
She just went, they didn't want to hear, Suzanne. They just didn't want to hear. They were like, nope, 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 nope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's disheartening after all this time, that we are still, that we're still dealing with this. I see women. One of the things that I do is I'm a provider on a platform called Maven.
Oh, yeah.
Which is employer provided healthcare services for women's reproductive health, basically, and everything that goes around that. So sex coaching is part of that. And I see a tremendous number of women come in, and so many of them, like one recently, she's in menopause and having a lot of symptoms, and her gynecologist is wonderful. She's seen her for a couple decades. She delivered her babies.
Wow.
I mean, she just is like, she loves this woman, and she can't talk to her about sex.
That sucks.
And it just is like, wow, really? Like, even some of our wonderful doctors and clinicians are just so ill-equipped to even talk about sex and pleasure and
So actually, before I forget, that is one of the things that I thought we should chat about just briefly. Is there's clearly a lot of people who just are afraid to go to their doctor and talk about these intimate issues, right? There just are. And if you are afraid to go to your doctor and talk about these intimate issues, what can you do to overcome that fear or to get the help you need? Like, what is your suggestion, being out there in the field? What can you do to help a woman who's too afraid to talk about some of the stuff that's going on?
Well, you have to find an outlet. I mean, if you're too afraid, then the first thing is to get over your fear and realize that you deserve to get support. So we have said some of the challenges of social media for sure we've talked about in this episode, but one of the other things is that social media, particularly Instagram, and I am not on TikTok. You are braver than I am, Suzanne. But there are a lot of, I see on Instagram, there are a lot of sort of pleasure evangelists and people who are really doctors and people who are really activists in the women's reproductive health space and sex activists. And so start following those accounts. And there are also some tech platforms, sex tech, that are really surfacing, that are all about women's health. You actually can, if your employer doesn't provide Maven, you can actually pay $50 for but pay out of pocket as an individual.
Okay.
And there's a lot of, there's just a whole sort of, bevy of providers of all kinds: pelvic floor therapists, physical therapists, OBGYNs, sex coaches, relationship coaches. All kinds of endocrinologists, all kinds of providers on Maven. And there are other companies like Maven as well. So I would say just start Googling, just start looking at Instagram, and find your people. There's a lot being said now.
I thought also one of the things that just struck me is that I've been finding that more and more in kind of large female communities on Facebook. I think you pointed me to Ethel, which was the AARP women, over 50s women community. There are people that are bringing up sex in those places, which are, and people, because it's such a huge group of, it's, hundreds of thousands of people on that group. And I've noticed that people have started having those kind of conversations about really intimate topics because they feel it's a safe space. And I think that it's one way to recognize, like I did last week in the discussion with Lauren, that our experience is not unique and that the things that we go through are shared amongst large groups of other women. And, when she starts talking about, for instance, challenges around orgasm or vaginal dryness or any of those things, and you go into these groups and bring that up, people do pile in and support you. And I have to say that I think that's the biggest difference between these kind of female only communities. Advantages of Age is mainly women only. And I have to say that the Facebook group that I co-run, and that's about 5,000 people. And we've had some pretty intimate discussions, and people are really supportive generally. I'm always surprised by how generous women are with their knowledge and just also making us feel like
we're not
alone,
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing about these kind of big Facebook groups of women, is that while on the one hand you can just follow people that also validate your experience, who perhaps have millions of followers, or like us, just out there doing this stuff, you can also find massive communities of people. And if you can overcome a bit of your fear around sharing some of those intimate topics, I think for the large part, you'll find that people really want to help you.
Yeah.
They really do. And I think for me, that's one of the first things, is that when you get 100 comments from someone in social media that says, yep, this drives me crazy as well, you feel armed, right? You feel like, I can go to a doctor with this and say, look, I posted this on a group of 100,000 women and I got over 100 comments from people telling me this is not unusual. So,
yes.
I think,
one of the things that, that you can do is to not force your provider, your doctors, to have these conversations, but really give them an opportunity to start to learn, especially if you have a doctor that you have a really good relationship with. Invite them to get more knowledgeable about it and to be able to meet your needs as their patient,
Yeah. I think you can, that's a choice that we all have to make, right? Is, do we try and educate someone who perhaps is giving us a bit of resistance to whatever we're proposing, or do we try and just find somebody who's more sympathetic? A friend of mine who had some significant endometriosis and was having really terrible pain, unfortunately, to the point where, they wanted to take out most of her insides just because for them, that was going to be the easy way out, right? We're just going to take it all out, and that's going to remove all of your pain and all of that. And she didn't want that to happen. And it was actually her husband who went to the doctor in the practice and just said, look, she's in a hell of a lot of pain, and I don't want my wife to be in this much pain. So what are you guys going to do about it? Right. And it was when her husband stepped in to say, I don't like seeing my wife suffering like this. Please find a way to help her without removing all her insides. Can you do that for me? And then she started going on bioidentical hormones. She went to see a specialist. She was referred to somebody else, completely transformed her menopause experience. She's so happy now. She's out of pain. You know, she's on her own special preparation of hormones that's been created specifically for her and all of that. But it was unfortunately her husband who insisted on her getting the help that she needed. So I think, you know, for me, that's the other thing. It's like, guys, you may be sitting around watching and feeling helpless, but often it's your word that may count.
Yes, right. That's infuriating, though, honestly. Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
totally infuriating, but not completely surprising. I think, you know, I don't want to be a man basher or stuff, but
no, it's not that. It's that women are, I mean, you know, there are all kinds of studies and data and evidence that women are not taken seriously, and women's pain is not taken seriously, and even by other women doctors often, you know, so it's not just men, but that, you know, when a man speaks up, it has impact. But, you know, use what you have and get the care that you need. And I have a big medical history. I have I'm a cancer survivor. I have a lot of history as a patient, and you know, you have to advocate for yourself. You just do. It's something that, at least in this country, in the United States, you really have to advocate and fight for your needs, you know?
Yeah, completely. And I mean, look, let's face it, when it comes to female reproductive health, it still seems to me as if there's fairly limited choices of how you can deal with any of the problems that we have. So, you know, we don't have an equivalent to Viagra, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, we've got HRT, we got some other stuff, but you know, it's not like there's like a huge, they haven't gone so deep into studying female reproductive health that, as we know, because it's still pretty new, because it's only recently that anybody started to listen to us about any of this. So, you know, so what's out there, I think, is fairly limited. But even so, the stuff that's out there can really help us. And I think for me, that's always the point, is that you have to be strong enough to ask and be willing to ask for help. And that is, you know, that's really important, because you can be helped in most cases. And and, you know, going back to the very beginning of this discussion about the porn men, right? Some of the conversation in that group was on that page was about the fact that their wife doesn't, quote unquote, put out anymore because she's always ill all the time, right? One guy said this, and therefore, that's his rationale for why he has to turn to porn, right? And you think, if you had a better understanding and appreciation of perhaps some of the issues that your wife was dealing with, then potentially you might not have had to resort to porn. But because maybe she's scared of addressing some of those issues directly with her doctor, and you are not able to support her in, you know, taking the steps that she needs to get the help that she needs, both of you are in a no-win situation here. So it doesn't benefit any party to not go and see the doctor. That's the thing.
Yeah. Listen,
Go on.
there are all kinds of issues with, I mean, just to bring it back to, as you say, the porn men. Um, there are all kinds of reasons why people watch porn, and porn in and of itself is not bad. And voyeurism and exhibitionism are healthy parts of sexual expression and sexual, and so there's a huge range. And porn addiction is an enormous issue. It really does exist, and maybe that's not you, and maybe your porn use is healthy, and that's fine. But if I mean, there is such a thing as porn addiction, and it
And let's
is
just end with
incredibly
that.
addictive, right?
We
All
didn't
right.
make it up, folks. We didn't
Yeah,
make it up. It does actually exist.
right.
Zoe, go and get the help you need, man, because Zoe's not very well. So go and get the
No,
help you need. And
thank you.
next week we've got a guest. And I'm gonna just leave that as a surprise.
I'm excited. I'm
But
excited for this guest.
I believe, in fact, that our guest is a man, and I believe that our male guest next week, may be talking about unreliable erections. Let's just say that.
Awesome.
So,
Awesome.
ciao, ciao.
Mwah.